When I opened my eyes that morning, I never imagined that by nightfall I'd no longer have a home to return to. Life has a cruel way of surprising us when we least expect it, of reminding us that nothing is guaranteed, not even the love of a child. My name is Abigail Harrington, and this is the story of how, at 68 years old, I found myself with my suitcases on the curb and a note that would change my life forever. The flight from Colorado had been exhausting. I'd spent a week visiting my sister Doris, who was recovered from hip surgery. They were intense days of caregiving and worry, but also filled with those deep conversations that only happen between sisters who have shared a lifetime of joys and sorrows. When the taxi stopped in front of my house, the home where I'd lived for the past 35 years, the first thing I saw were my 4 suitcases neatly stacked on the sidewalk. For an instant, I thought there must be some mistake. Maybe the taxi driver had the wrong address. But no, I recognized the oak tree that Walter and I had planted when Nathan was just learning to crawl, the peonies blooming in the front garden, the wooden rocking chair on the porch where I used to read during summer afternoons. "Are you sure this is the right place, ma'am?" asked the driver, confused by the scene. "Yes," I replied, unable to form more words as a lump formed in my throat. I paid the fare and slowly exited the vehicle. The sky threatened rain, dark clouds gathering overhead like a premonition of what was to come. With trembling hands, I picked up a white envelope that was attached to the handle of my largest suitcase. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted and sharp letters, written in haste. It was Tiffany's handwriting, my daughter-in-law. "If you want to stay here, you have the garage. We need the room for the home office. Garage keys under the blue pot." I read the note over and over, as if the words might change their meaning if I stared at them long enough. My heart pounded as the reality hit me with the same intensity as the first raindrops on my face. The house where Walter and I had loved each other, where we had raised our only son, where every corner held a precious memory, was no longer my home. I was a stranger on my own property. 2 years ago, after Walter died following a long battle with cancer, I had transferred the property into Nathan and Tiffany's names. It was a decision I made believing I would help them financially, especially after the birth of Hannah. Expenses had multiplied, and they seemed to be struggling to stay afloat. What nobody knew was that I was still the one paying the mortgage monthly, a secret I kept to avoid embarrassing Nathan, to preserve his pride as the man of the family. Each month, $1,870 automatically left my account to keep a roof over our heads. With the rain intensifying, I sought shelter under the small eave of the entrance. I took out my phone and called the bank before the taxi drove too far away. I needed to confirm what I already knew. "Good morning, First National Bank. This is Rebecca speaking. How may I help you?" "Good morning, this is Abigail Harrington. I'd like to confirm if my automatic mortgage payment went through last Friday." There was a brief silence while she typed. "Yes, Mrs. Harrington. The $1,870 payment was processed correctly as scheduled. Is there anything else you need?" "No, thank you," I whispered, ending the call. A heavy raindrop hit my forehead as I stood there, motionless, watching my belongings get soaked in the downpour that was now falling mercilessly. The sky opened up at that moment, as if allowing me to break down too. I should have seen it coming. The furtive glances between Nathan and Tiffany whenever I mentioned redecorating the kitchen, the not-so-subtle comments about senior communities where I wouldn't have to worry about yard work, the way they reorganized the living room when I visited Doris last Christmas, moving my reading chair to the basement, small details that, in retrospect, were signs of what was to come. The garage door wasn't locked. A double mattress was propped against a wall, with a small nightstand and a lamp beside it. My clothes hung on a mobile rack, and my books, photographs, and mementos were stacked in cardboard boxes labeled Mom's Things in Tiffany's handwriting. I collapsed onto the mattress, the cold concrete floor beneath my feet. Through the small window, I could see the house where I had raised my son, buried my husband, and apparently lost my place in the world. My phone vibrated with a message from Nathan. "Mom, we need the space. Tiffany needs a home office now that she's working remotely. The garage has everything you need for now. Don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult." As if I were the problem, as if my existence were an inconvenience to them. I've never been one to cry easily, but tears fell silently and hot down my cheeks. I thought about all the nights I'd stayed awake when Nathan had asthma attacks. As a child, the second job I took to pay for his college when Walter's business was struggling, the weekends I devoted to caring for Hannah so that Nathan and Tiffany could have time for themselves. And now I was an inconvenient burden, relegated to the garage like an old piece of furniture that no longer matched the decor. I didn't respond to Nathan's message. Instead, I called Maureen, my lifelong friend. "Abigail? What's wrong?" she asked, immediately detecting the distress in my voice. "I need a place to stay," I tried to say, but the words caught in my throat like shards of glass. They've put me in the garage." Maureen didn't demand explanations. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said, and hung up. As I sat waiting on the thin mattress, surrounded by the boxed remains of my life, I made a decision. This house had been my heart for 35 years. I had put everything into it, my love, my savings, my dreams, and now they thought they could just push me aside so easily. The garage door rattled as the rain outside intensified. I looked at my trembling hands and slowly closed them into fists. They didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't just Nathan's mother or Walter's widow. I am Abigail Harrington, and I had just decided that I would never be invisible again. Would I really have the courage to stand up for myself after years of putting everyone else first? Or was I just having a momentary surge of righteous anger that would dissolve into resignation once again? As the rain pounded against the garage roof, I wondered what path I would choose and whether I had the strength to walk it alone. Maureen's guest room wasn't much, but at least it had a door with a lock and a window that let in real sunlight. After 3 days at the Sunset Motel, a name that seemed oddly appropriate for this chapter of my life, I was grateful to be in a place that wasn't charging me by the night. "You can stay as long as you need, darling," Maureen insisted, placing a cup of coffee in front of me. "Jim and I rattle around this house like 2 peas in an oversized pod since the kids went off to college." I clutched the hot cup in my hands, letting the warmth comfort my stiff fingers. "I appreciate it, but this can't be permanent. I need to figure out what to do about the house." "You mean your house?" Maureen corrected, narrowing her eyes. "The house you're still paying for?" Maureen has been my friend for over 30 years. She knew Walter. She watched Nathan grow up. She was there through the good times and bad. And unlike my son, she remembered who I was before I became invisible. "I keep thinking about when things started to change," I said, staring into my coffee. "After Walter passed away, I thought giving the house to Nathan and Tiffany would help them. They had just had Hannah, money was tight, and they took advantage," Maureen completed. Memories surfaced like bruises I had avoided pressing. 6 months after the funeral, Tiffany began reorganizing the house, saying it needed an update. My suggestions were dismissed, my belongings relegated first to closets, then to the basement, then to storage containers. Do you know what Tiffany said when I objected to her throwing out Walter's fishing gear? "We need to move forward, not live in a museum." As if my husband's memories were just clutter that needed to be cleaned up. Maureen reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "And Nathan? Surely he stood up for you, right?" I laughed, a hollow sound that surprised even me. "Nathan said I was being difficult, that I needed to adapt to the new normal." His new normal apparently meant forgetting his father and sidelining his mother. The takeover had been so gradual that I barely noticed it happening. First, they commandeered the kitchen, saying my way of cooking. Then came complaints that my TV shows were too loud, my friends visited too frequently, my gardening took up too much space in their yard. Each of my surrenders only emboldened them more. The worst part is that I realize I allowed it all to happen, I confessed. I kept paying the mortgage because I was afraid they would struggle financially. I wanted to help them, to be useful, to be loved, Maureen said softly. The truth in her words was painful. I was buying my place in that house in my own son's life, one payment at a time. My phone vibrated with another message from Nathan. "Mom, when are you coming to get your remaining things? We need to convert the garage into Hannah's playroom." I passed the phone to Maureen. My hand was shaking slightly. "That ungrateful little," she hissed. Then her expression changed, as if she had just remembered something important. "Abigail, there's something you should know. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt, but you deserve to know the truth." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" Last month, at the book club, Tiffany was there. She'd had a couple of glasses of wine and started talking about their plans. Plans? They're selling the house. They want to buy that new construction in Oak Ridge Heights. The room seemed to tilt to one side. They were selling my house? The house where I had lived for 35 years, where every wall held a precious memory. "They think it's their house," Maureen said gently. "And technically, legally, it is, but morally, it's a different story." I thought about all the memories etched into those walls, Walter and I bringing baby Nathan home, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, the garden that Walter built for our 20th anniversary, my husband's last breaths in our bedroom, surrounded by the life we had built together. And they would sell it all to strangers without a second thought. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. Maureen's eyes hardened with determination. "First, you're going to stop paying their mortgage. Let's see how quickly their plans change when the bank starts calling." "But what about my credit?" "Second," she continued, ignoring my question, "you're going to talk to my nephew Curtis. He's an attorney who specializes in elder rights. There has to be some legal recourse here." "I'm not an elder," I protested weakly. Maureen raised an eyebrow. "You're old enough to be treated with respect, and that's not what's happening here." She was right. For 2 years, I had made myself smaller and quieter to avoid being a burden. And where had that gotten me? Thrown out of my own house, my possessions packed in boxes, my existence reduced to an inconvenience. As the reality of my situation crystallized, something else emerged from beneath the pain and betrayal, a simmering anger, burning slowly, almost foreign after years of accommodation. "All right," I said, straightening my shoulders. "Let's talk to Curtis." Maureen squeezed my hand. "That's my girl. And Abigail, remember who you are. You're not just Nathan's mother or Walter's widow. You're Abigail Harrington, and it's time everyone remembered that. For the first time since I found my suitcases on the curb, I felt a glimmer of hope, or perhaps it was determination. Either way, I wasn't going down without a fight, but the hardest question still remained. Was I willing to risk my relationship with my only son, to reclaim what was rightfully mine? I had always thought family was the most important thing in life. Now I was being forced to choose between my dignity and my child. It was a choice no mother should ever have to make. And as I sipped my cooling coffee, I wondered if there was any path forward that wouldn't break my heart. Curtis, Maureen's nephew, wasn't what I expected. With his worn jeans and open-collared shirt, he looked more like a college professor than an attorney, but his eyes were sharp as he reviewed the mortgage statements I had brought him. "So you've been paying for a house that's no longer in your name," he said, frowning, "and your son and daughter-in-law have been living there rent-free while planning to sell it. To put it bluntly, Mrs. Harrington, that sounds atrocious, even to me, and I'd been practicing family law for years." "Yes," I replied, feeling my cheeks flush with shame. "And they put me in the garage?" I nodded, unable to find words to describe the humiliation. How had I let things get to this point? "You have options," Curtis said, leaning back in his chair. "The financial arrangements could constitute a verbal contract. At minimum, you could sue to recover the mortgage payments you've made since the property was transferred." Maureen, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. "She needs to confront them first, make them understand what they've done." Curtis seemed skeptical, but in my heart I knew Maureen was right. Before pursuing legal action against my own son, I needed to give him one last chance to do the right thing. That's how I found myself standing on the porch of my house the next day, my heart pounding as I rang the doorbell. I had lived in this house before Nathan was born, and now I was a visitor who needed to ask permission to enter. Tiffany answered, her surprise quickly masked by a forced smile. "Oh, Abigail, we weren't expecting you." "I need to talk to you and Nathan," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course. Come in." The living room had changed again since I'd left. My reading lamp was gone, replaced by a modern floor lamp I didn't recognize. The family photos I had arranged on the mantelpiece had been reorganized, some of the pictures of Walter now absent. Nathan emerged from the kitchen, drying his hands on a towel. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk about the house," I said directly. "Maureen told me you're planning to sell it." Their exchanged glances confirmed everything. "We were going to tell you," Nathan said, not meeting my eyes, "when everything was finalized." "Finalized," I repeated. "This has been my home for 35 years. Your father and I built this home. We raised you here." Tiffany sighed dramatically. "Oh, Abigail, we understand you have emotional attachments, but we need to do what's best for our family now." "Your family?" I repeated. "And what am I?" An awkward silence stretched between us. "Mom," Nathan finally said, with a condescending tone he had never used with me before, "you signed the house over to us. We appreciate everything you've done, but it's our property now. We'll decide what happens to it." I took a deep breath, gathering my strength. "I've been paying the mortgage for the past 2 years, $1,807 every month from my account, to keep a roof over your heads." Another look between them. They knew. "That was your choice," Tiffany said coldly. "We never asked you to do that." My hands began to tremble. "I did it to help you, because that's what family does." And we're grateful, Nathan said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But that doesn't change the legal situation. The house is ours. So my 35 years here, my financial support, my role in this family, none of that matters. Nathan shrugged, looking uncomfortable but not moved. Mom, you're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. We can help you find a nice senior condo. I don't need a nice senior condo, I snapped. I need my son to show a little courtesy and respect. Tiffany stepped forward, her smile sweet but her eyes cold. I think you're upset. Maybe we should continue this conversation another time. That's when I knew, truly knew, that there was no way to fix this. The son I had raised, the son I loved with all my heart, was gone. In his place was a stranger who saw me as nothing more than an obligation, a problem to be solved. I've stopped making the automatic mortgage payments, I said quietly. Nathan's expression changed instantly. What? If you want to sell my house, you'll have to pay for it yourselves. We can't do that, Tiffany interjected, her voice shrill. What about our credit? We have plans. Yes, I said. I heard Oak Ridge Heights is very nice this time of year. Nathan's face darkened. Mom, this house is Dad's gift to me. You know that. It was never really yours. Those words hit me like a physical blow. Never really yours. 35 years of my life dismissed in 5 words. I understand, I said, my voice barely audible. Well, I guess there's nothing more to discuss then. I turned, my legs shaking as I headed for the door. When I reached the threshold, I paused, looking back at my son who was already no longer seeing me. Your father would be ashamed of you, Nathan. And for the first time, so am I. I walked out and gently closed the door behind me. The fresh spring air was cool on my hot cheeks as I walked down the path, away from the house that had never really been mine. Something broke inside me that day. But something else, something stronger, was forged in its place. As the weight of the confrontation settled on my shoulders, I wondered if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life, or if I had finally started living again. All I knew for certain was that the road ahead would be harder than anything I had ever imagined. You did what? Asked Maureen, her coffee cup suspended halfway between the table and her lips. I stopped the payments, I repeated, still shocked by my own audacity. I told them if they wanted to sell the house, they'd have to pay for it themselves. Maureen set her cup down with a decisive thunk. Good for you. It's about time. Curtis, who had insisted on joining us after my confrontation, seemed less enthusiastic. This is a good first step, but we need to protect you legally. If your name is no longer on the deed, you could be liable for the missed payments without any claim to the property. The adrenaline that had propelled me through the confrontation was fading, leaving room for doubt to seep in. Had I made a terrible mistake? No, Maureen said firmly, reading my thoughts. You finally stood up for yourself. Curtis tapped his pen against his notebook. Let's be strategic about this. I'll contact the bank tomorrow. I'll explain the situation and see what options we have. Meanwhile, you need to gather any evidence showing that you've been making these payments. I nodded, thinking of the meticulous financial records that Walter had taught me to keep. At least I had that going for me. What about my things? And the house? I asked, feeling the weight of all the belongings I had left behind, each object imbued with memories. Maureen straightened her shoulders. I'll go with you to get them if they give us any trouble. I still remember how to swing a baseball bat from my Little League days. Despite everything, I laughed. Maureen had always been fiercely protective, even in high school when she confronted the girls who mocked my secondhand clothes. "I don't know what I'd do without you two," I said, my voice trembling. Curtis reached out and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone in this, Mrs. Harrington. We'll make sure you're not taken advantage of anymore." The next morning, I received a call from First National Bank. I answered with apprehension, expecting questions about the missed mortgage payment. "Mrs. Harrington, this is Daniel Reynolds from the mortgage department. We received a request to discuss the situation with your property on Maple Street." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Yes, that's correct. I understand you've been paying for a property that's no longer in your name. Our records show consistent payments from your account for the past 26 months. "Yes," I confirmed, "but I've decided to stop those payments." There was a pause. "Mrs. Harrington, I don't normally do this, but would you be willing to come into the branch to discuss this? There might be options you haven't considered." 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Daniel, a kind man about my son's age, as he explained something called equitable interest. Basically, by consistently making mortgage payments on a property you don't directly benefit from, you may have established an equitable interest in the property even without being on the deed. A flush of hope pulsed in my chest. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means you could potentially place a lien on the property for the amount you've contributed. They couldn't sell it without resolving that lien." For the first time since I found my suitcases on the curb, I felt a fragment of control returning, turning my hands. "One more thing," Daniel said, his voice dropping slightly. "Your son called this morning, and he was quite upset about the missed payment. He doesn't seem to understand how mortgages work." I wasn't surprised. Nathan had always depended on others to handle the practical aspects of life. First Walter and me, now Tiffany, and obviously my monthly payment. "What did you tell him?" "That a missed payment would affect his credit score and could eventually lead to foreclosure," Daniel said. He didn't take it well. As if on cue, my phone vibrated with a message from Nathan. "Mom, we need to talk about the mortgage ASAP." I showed the message to Daniel. "What do you want to do, Mrs. Harrington?" he asked. It was a simple question, but no one had asked me that in years. What did I want? Not just regarding the house, but regarding my life. I thought about the confrontation with Nathan and Tiffany, their casual dismissal of my contributions, their assumption that I would continue funding their dreams while being relegated to the garage. "I want what is rightfully mine," I said, surprising myself with my resolute voice. Daniel nodded, respect clearly visible on his face. "Then let's make that happen." That afternoon, armed with information from Daniel and legal advice from Curtis, I took another unexpected step in my new life. I applied for a job. The help wanted sign in the window of Rose's Cafe caught my eye as I was walking back to Maureen's house. "You want to be a waitress?" Maureen asked when I told her about my interview. I laughed. "I waitressed all through college," I reminded her. "And I need my own income, my own life. I can't hide in your guest room forever." Maureen considered this. "Well, Rose does make the best pies in town. At least you'll have good benefits." 2 days later, I had my first shift. My feet were sore and my back was aching by the end of the day. But the tips in my pocket were mine, earned with my own hands. That simple satisfaction was something I hadn't felt in years. When I returned to Maureen's house, exhausted but strangely invigorated, I had 6 missed calls from Nathan on my phone. I listened to the first voicemail. "Mom, The bank called about the mortgage. They mentioned a lien. What are you doing? Call me back immediately. I deleted it without listening to the others. This time, Nathan would have to wait until it was convenient for me, not the other way around. As I sat out on Maureen's porch swing that evening, with the sunset painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I wondered whether I was making the right choices. Was I burning bridges that could never be rebuilt, or was I finally claiming the dignity that had been slowly stripped from me? Either way, there was no going back now, only forward into an uncertain future that for the first time in years belonged completely to me. Maureen brought me a glass of wine and sat beside me on the porch swing. "How does it feel?" she asked softly. I considered the question as I watched the sunset. "It feels like I've finally woken up," I said, as if I'd been sleepwalking ever since Walter died. "And now I'm someone else," I said. "And yourself again," Maureen finished for me. I nodded, raising my glass in a toast. "Abigail Harrington. It's good to finally meet her." After 3 weeks working at Rose's Cafe, I had settled into a routine that felt surprisingly comfortable. My tips were modest but steady, and the manual work kept me busy. Most importantly, I had purpose again, a place to go, people who counted on me, a life that was completely my own. That's why the sight of Nathan standing awkwardly at the counter startled me. "Mom," he said, his voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "Can we talk?" Rose, the owner, glanced at me from behind the register. "Take 15 if you need it." I nodded and led Nathan to a corner booth, away from my regular customers who had become something like ferns in these few weeks. "You look different," he said, eyeing me. "The apron," I joked. "I am different." Nathan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mom, about the house." "I'm not discussing it here," I interrupted him. "I know why you came, and you're wasting your time." "Please," he said, with a hint of desperation in his voice. "Tiffany and I are in trouble. The bank called again, and our credit scores are dropping because of the missed payments." I studied my son, his expensive watch, his carefully groomed hair, the subtle scent of cologne that probably cost more than I made in a day. Everything about him exuded entitlement and comfort, a life cushioned by the sacrifices of others. "What do you want from me, Nathan?" He leaned forward. "We need you to bail us out and continue the payments until we can sell the house." His audacity almost made me laugh out loud. "And what do I get in return?" "We'll make sure you're taken care of," he said, as if he were doing me a huge favor. "There's a great senior community in Pine Grove." "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "I'm not interested in being taken care of. I've been taking care of myself and you for years." "Be reasonable," he insisted. "You can't keep working here." He gestured around the cafe with disdain. "You're almost 68, I corrected, "and I'm perfectly fine." Nathan's face tensed slightly, his mask of contrition slipping. "Fine, what do you want?" I studied him, this stranger masquerading as my son. "I want my house back." He blinked. Then he laughed nervously. "That's impossible. We've already made an offer on the house in Oak Ridge Heights." "Not my problem." Nathan's expression darkened. "It is your problem if you want to have a relationship with your granddaughter, with any of us." The threat hung between us, ugly and explicit. My own son was using my love for Hannah as leverage. "Are you threatening to keep Hannah away from me?" He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but he persevered. "I'm just saying that families need to support each other. Tiffany and I have a plan for our future, and you're getting in the way." How was I getting in the way when I paid for your college, or when I watched Hannah every weekend so you and Tiffany could have time for yourselves, or when I signed over the house and continued making the payments so you could save money for the boat you bought last summer? Nathan turned red. That's not fair. No, it's not, I agreed. My break is almost over. I need to get back to work. I slid out of the booth and tied my apron back on. Mom, please, Nathan's voice cracked slightly. We need this. The house in Oak Ridge Heights is perfect. We can't lose it. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to climb onto my lap with scraped knees, expecting me to make things better. But that boy was gone. In his place was a man who saw me as nothing more than a means to an end. I'll think about it, I said finally. But first I need something in writing from you and Tiffany. Meet me at Curtis Landry's office tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Relief flooded Nathan's face. Thanks, Mom. You won't regret it. As he walked away, I wondered if I already had. The next day, I arrived early at Curtis's office, my stomach churning and knotted. I had barely slept, replaying the decision I'd made in the middle of the night, when doubts are darkest and certainties brightest. Nathan and Tiffany arrived punctually at 2, both dressed as if they were at a business meeting. Tiffany's smile was tight but triumphant as they sat across from Curtis's desk. Thank you for coming, Curtis began formally. Mrs. Harrington has been considering your request regarding the property on Maple Street. We appreciate that, Tiffany said smoothly. We're sure we can reach an arrangement that benefits everyone. Curtis slid a document across the table. This is what Mrs. Harrington proposes. Nathan picked it up, scanning the contents. His expression changed from hope to confusion to anger in a matter of seconds. What is this? It's my condition for lifting the lien, I said calmly. I'll continue paying the mortgage, but the house will be sold to me, not to a stranger. Tiffany snatched the paper from Nathan's hands. This is ridiculous. You want us to sell you the house for what's left of the mortgage? It's worth at least 3 times that. It's worth what I've invested in it, I replied. 35 years of payments, repairs, and improvements. Nathan's face was now an alarming shade of red. You can't do this. The house is legally ours. With a slight tilt of his head, Curtis pointed out, this lien significantly complicates any possibility of a sale. We'll fight this, Tiffany said, her voice icy. We'll hire our own lawyer. I nodded, having anticipated this response. You can try, but the legal process will take time, months, possibly years. Your credit scores will continue to suffer, and the house of your dreams in Oak Ridge Heights will be bought by someone else. This truth visibly sank in. Nathan and Tiffany had overextended themselves, counting on a quick sale of my house to finance their upgrade. Have you been planning this from the beginning? Nathan accused, his voice little more than a whisper. From the moment you moved us to the garage? No, I said softly. Only recently did I stop allowing myself to be taken advantage of. Tiffany rose abruptly. We need to discuss this privately. As they left, Curtis gave me a nod of approval. You're doing the right thing, Mrs. Harrington. I wasn't so sure. The look of betrayal in Nathan's eyes haunted me. Had I become as calculating and cold as they were? Was this really justice or just revenge in disguise? Before I could ponder it further, the office door opened. Nathan and Tiffany returned, their faces grim but resigned. We'll accept your offer, Nathan said stiffly, but I hope you understand what this means for our relationship. I looked directly into my son's eyes. I do, and I hope someday you understand what it meant when you put my suitcases on the curb. That night, as we signed the documents that would legally return my house to my name, I wondered if I had just won the battle but lost the war. Was regaining my home worth the cost of my relationship with my only son? The first night back in my house, I couldn't sleep. I wandered from room to room, touching the familiar walls, tracing the door frame where we had marked Nathan's height each year. I stood in the kitchen, where Walter and I had danced on our 30th anniversary, his warm hand on my waist, his eyes bright with love. It had been 3 months since the confrontation in Curtis's office. 3 months of legal proceedings, of tense inches with Nathan and Tiffany as they grudgingly moved out, of rebuilding my life piece by piece. The house was both familiar and strange. Tiffany had painted some of the rooms in modern grays and whites, eliminating the warm yellows and blues that Walter and I had chosen. The kitchen had been renovated with sleek, soulless appliances that seemed to stare at me coldly. But beneath the cosmetic changes, the bones of the house remained. The creaky third step on the stairs, the way sunlight streamed through the arched window in the afternoon, the slight slope of the floor in the upstairs hallway that Walter had never quite managed to fix. I stood in the master bedroom, now empty of furniture except for the bed I'd brought from Maureen's guest room. This room, where Walter and I had shared our lives, where he had breathed his last, felt somehow sacred. "I'm home," I whispered, as if he could hear me. The silence that answered wasn't loneliness, but simply peace. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I belonged. The doorbell rang the next morning as I was unpacking my modest collection of dishes. I opened the door to find Maureen standing there with a pot of soup and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming," she announced, brushing past me into the kitchen. "Though I suppose technically it's a homecoming." I laughed, following her. "It feels like both, to be honest." Maureen set her offerings on the counter and turned to inspect the kitchen. "Good Lord, what did that woman do to your beautiful oak cabinets?" "Painted them gray and replaced all the knobs with something called brushed nickel," I said. "Apparently, oak is outdated." Maureen snorted. "You know what's outdated? Throwing your mother-in-law out on the street." We both laughed, though the pain behind the humor remained. "Have you heard from them?" Maureen asked as she helped me unpack. I shook my head. Since the closing, Nathan had made it clear that I had chosen the house over them. "That's not what happened, and you know it," Maureen said firmly. "You chose self-respect. There's a difference." I wasn't sure Nathan would ever see it that way, but I had accepted my decision. The alternative, continuing to allow them to use me while treating me as an afterthought, was no longer acceptable. "Well," Maureen said, opening the bottle of wine, "to new beginnings." We clinked our glasses, and I felt a surge of gratitude for the woman who had always been there for me when my own family was not. The following weeks brought a steady rhythm to my days. Mornings at Rose's Cafe, afternoons devoted to slowly restoring the house to something that resembled me again. I didn't have the money to replace all of Tiffany's modern furniture, but I could add touches that brought warmth. Colorful pillows, family photographs replaced on the mantelpiece, Walter's fishing gear hanging proudly in the study. One Saturday morning, I was planting tulip bulbs in the front garden when a familiar car pulled into the driveway. My heart jumped to my throat as Nathan got out, looking uncomfortable. He stood awkwardly at the edge of the garden. "The flowers look nice." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Dad always liked tulips," he continued, looking around the garden. "I remember he planted them every fall." I took off my gardening gloves, brushing the dirt from my hands. "What brings you here, Nathan?" He shifted uncomfortably. We couldn't buy the house in Oak Ridge Heights." I wasn't surprised. Presumably, their credit had been too damaged by the missed mortgage payments. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it, despite everything. Nathan looked at his shoes, his expensive loafers now covered with garden dust. "We found a condo instead. It's small, but I guess it's given us some perspective." I waited, sensing there was more. "Tiffany's pregnant again," he finally said. "The twins are due in January." "Congratulations," I said softly, wondering if this news was meant to hurt me, to remind me of what I would miss. Nathan met my eyes for the first time. "Hannah asks about you. She doesn't understand why we don't visit anymore." A sharp, sweet pain pierced my heart. I missed my granddaughter terribly. "She is always welcome here," I said. "You too?" Nathan nodded, then hesitated. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened." I held my breath, not daring to hope for true understanding. "I'm not saying we handled things well," he continued, choosing his words carefully. "But you chose the house over family. I don't know if I can forgive that." My momentary hope faded. He still didn't understand. "I didn't choose the house, Nathan," I said gently. "I chose not to be erased. There's a difference." He frowned, obviously disagreeing. "Anyway, I thought you should know about the babies, and maybe Hannah can come visit sometimes, if that's okay." It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was a small opening, a tiny crack in the wall between us. "I'd like that," I said. After Nathan left, I sat on the porch swing processing the encounter. My relationship with my son was damaged, perhaps irreparably. He still couldn't see how deeply he had hurt me, how fundamentally he had betrayed my trust. But today he had come. He had reached out, however inadequately. It was a beginning, not an end. That evening, Maureen and Jim came over, along with Rose from the cafe and Curtis with his wife. We sat in my backyard, the same yard where I had hosted Nathan's graduation party, where Walter and I had celebrated anniversaries, where life had unfolded in all its glorious messiness. As twilight enveloped us, conversation flowed freely among those who had become my chosen family. I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. "A toast," declared Maureen, raising her glass, "to Abigail Harrington, who reminds us all that it's never too late to reclaim your life." Everyone clinked their glasses, smiling warmly at me. Later, as stars appeared in the summer blue sky, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of the house. I thought about Walter, about the life we had built, about the son we had raised who had lost his way. I thought about the woman I had become in these past months, stronger, more determined, not willing to be diminished for anyone's convenience. The house was more than walls and a roof around me. It was a testament to survival, to resilience, to the quiet, unstoppable power of a woman who had finally learned to put herself first. I had come home, not just to this house, but to my own life. For the first time in years, that life stretched before me, full of possibilities entirely my own. I am Abigail Harrington, and if you're reading this, I hope you'll pause for a moment, not to pity me, but to look at your own life, where perhaps you too are being pushed into a corner, quietly and unnoticed. My story isn't just the story of an elderly woman abandoned by her son or a home reclaimed. It's a story of awakening, of claiming a deserved place in a life you once thought had no room left for your voice. I used to be compliant. I used to keep quiet to keep the peace. I used to fear that if I spoke up, the family would break. But when I saw my suitcases on the curb with the note saying if I wanted to stay, it would be in the garage, I knew that if I didn't stand up, I would disappear completely. Not die in the physical sense, but fade from who I once was. And so I chose not to be invisible anymore. I am no longer Nathan's mother. I am no longer Walter's widow. I am not the housekeeper, the cook, the babysitter. I am Abigail. I have a name, a life, a heart that loves and hurts. And I deserve a place in this world I helped build. If you've ever felt like me, if you've ever been pushed aside, if you've ever silenced a sighs when disrespected, I hope you understand one thing. Sacrifice is noble, but it should never be a path for others to walk over you. Love cannot exist if it feeds on one-sided submission, and family without respect is just a blood relation, not a home. I tell this story not for you to congratulate me on being strong or determined, but to remind you, you can do the same. No matter who you are, how old you are, what gender you are, whether you live in a 4-bedroom house or a mansion, you have the right to say, I deserve better than this. No one has the right to put you in the garage of life, silent, hidden, just because you've loved too much. And I also want to ask you, if it were you, what would you do upon coming home to find your suitcases on the curb? Have you ever been pushed out of the role that belonged to you? Have you ever been sidelined in the name of family? If you want to tell your story, I'll listen. I'll help you turn it into a story so it's not just a silent pain, but a voice that resonates. Tell me where you're reading this story from. New York, Chicago, Seattle, or some small unnamed town. Because I want my journey not to stop at Maple Street. I want this story to reach those who once bowed their heads, resigned themselves, thought they had nothing left to save. I am Abigail Harrington. I was once pushed to the edge and have come back to the center of my life, not because I'm not afraid, but because I know that if I don't reclaim my self-worth, I'll have nothing to pass on to my granddaughter except a lesson in silence. If you're ready, I'll be the one to write the first chapter of your new story. And if you're not ready, keep these lines until the day you look in the mirror and wonder, when will I get to live as myself? Then remember, I stood up, and so can you. I want to know if something similar has happened to you. How did you manage to move forward? Have you felt ignored or minimized by your family? Have they told you it's for your own good when they're actually pushing you aside? Tell me your story. I want to know I'm not the only one who has been through this and that there is hope for all of us. Tell me what city you're reading this from. I want to know how far my story has traveled. Maybe you're in Los Angeles, Houston, Boston, or a small town hidden in the mountains. It doesn't matter. What matters is that my message reaches whoever needs it. Remember, it's never too late to take control of your life. Don't let anyone tell you what you're worth. You are the only person who can define your own destiny. Take heart and never give up.